Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May God protect us. May God nourish us. May we work together with energy and vigor. May our study be enlightening and not give rise to misunderstanding. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsacharnuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Bande Jagadguru. I salute Krishna, the Guru of the universe, God, the son of Kamsa, the son of Vasudeva, the destroyer of Kamsa and Chanura, the supreme bliss of Devaki. Verse number 54. But I promised something. I'm going to summarize all this from the beginning till verse number 54, but let's just start. Arjuna uvacha stita prajnasya ka bhasha samadhistasya keshava stitadi kim prabhasheta kimasita vrajeta kim. Arjuna said, O Krishna, how can one identify a man who is firmly established and absorbed in Brahman? O Krishna, how can one identify someone who is firmly established and absorbed in Brahman? In what manner does an illumined soul speak? How does he sit? How does he walk? And the Lord said, Shri Bhagavan Uvacha, Prajahati yada kaman sarvan parthamanogatam atmanyevatmana tushtaha stita prajnastado uchyate. When a man completely casts away, O Arjuna, all cravings that torment the heart. When a man completely casts away, O Arjuna, all cravings that torment the heart, that is, he renounces all desires that have entered his mind, and remains satisfied in the self, the capital self, alone, by the self, but again the capital self. Then he is said to be a man of steady wisdom. When a man completely casts away all the cravings that enter his mind, his heart, and remains completely satisfied in the self, by the self, then he is said to be a man of steady wisdom. What do we mean by steady wisdom? Settled conviction of one's identity with Brahman, gained by direct realization. This direct realization arises from discrimination. Discrimination. Is this just for a few? Well, it depends on you. It depends on our commitment, our longing, our love for God. A man of steady wisdom, a man of realization, one whose wisdom arising from the discrimination between the self, the capital Self, and the non-self is stable. Now, how do we get there? This sounds exquisite, delicious, but it's a long way. Fire is hot. It need not go anywhere in search of warmth. Even so, Atman is bliss. Just like fire is hot, even so, Atman is bliss. It imposes the bliss within on objects outside and goes in search of those objects, believing that with their acquisition, happiness can be gained. Are you following me? The Atman imposes the bliss. Who is the Atman? We'll get there.
God within.
God within.
You can say, I am the Atman.
You are the Atman. Very good. The self, the capital self, who we really are. Not our identification with our body-mind complex, but our essence. It's called the witness. It imposes the bliss and is of the nature of bliss, eternal bliss. That's why we are all looking for that happiness outside. That's all we want. We are that bliss. It imposes the bliss within on objects outside and goes in search of those objects, believing that with their acquisition, happiness can be gained. Is it familiar? Does it sound familiar to us? This is the story of our life, right? This search outside for happiness is called kama, cravings or wants. This attracting modification of the mind, encouraging us to go outside, is called kama. These waves and ripples of the mind obstruct the vision of the Atman, of the self within us. The changeless bliss within reveals itself as the happiness coming from the sense objects outside. And when we see something that we like, that we want, we get it, we feel something. Just for a millisecond. Just like a drop of water on a frying pan, a hot pan. That bliss. And then you want more and more. Then the problem starts. These waves and ripples of the mind obstruct the vision of the Atman, the self, the bliss. The changeless bliss within reveals itself as the happiness coming from the sense objects outside. When the mind is pacified by relinquishing all these kamas, all these cravings, I want this, I want that. Oh, maybe it's this, maybe it's not him, somebody else. Maybe he or she is the right one. When the mind is pacified by relinquishing all the kamas, the blissful Atman is realized in its original glory. He who realizes this intuits that the happiness he sought for in the world outside is in its entirety in himself. He remains self-satisfied. He who realizes this intuits that the happiness he sought for in the world outside is completely within himself. He remains self-satisfied. satisfied. Now, in order to get there, we need to understand. In order to understand, we will start again. Chapter number 1. Did you understand? Shri Krishna keeps asking Arjuna, and Arjuna keeps asking the same questions again and again throughout the entire Gita till he gets it. Our scriptures say that source of bliss we look for in the outside world is sitting within us. It's God sitting in our own hearts. There is a kettle. There is water. There is fire. And what you want is hot water. So what do? You just pour the water over the fire? No. You use the kettle as a means to heat the water. As the process starts, the kettle gets hotter and hotter. It starts gaining heat. The same goes with the water. It gets hotter and hotter. But why is the water hot?
There's different ways to say it. The kettle.
We simplify, right?
The kettle makes it hot.
Because of the contact with the hot kettle. Now, why is the kettle hot? Because of its contact with the fire, which is naturally hot. Now the next question is, why is the fire hot? Because it is
Fire.
Because it is fire. Why does the sun shine? Because it's the sun. You see? Because of its intrinsic property, that is called swarupam in Sanskrit. There is an intrinsic property. Now, just as in the fire, imagine what happens to us. Why is the kettle hot? Because of its swarupam, because of its intrinsic property. No, the property is borrowed from the fire. In the kettle, the heat is not an intrinsic property, but is a borrowed one. Are you following me? The heat in the kettle, is it an intrinsic property? It's borrowed. Borrowed. In the kettle, the heat is not an intrinsic property, but a borrowed one. When borrowed, we call it incidental. And so it goes with the heated water. An incidental property, it has to be dependent. It depends on something else. But the heat in the fire is an intrinsic property and therefore does not depend on any other factor from outside. The heat in the fire is absolutely independent. The fire is hot all the time. It is eternally hot. As long as the water is associated with the kettle and the kettle with the fire, the water will remain hot, but not permanently. You remove the kettle from the fire, what's going to happen? The heat in the kettle depends on the fire. just as it is the water and the heat being borrowed by the fire, the heat we are looking for outside will never be permanent. What is the heat that we are looking for outside us? What kind of heat? What do we want?
Intrinsic.
What do we want? Intrinsic, yeah, but more than that. What do we want? Bliss. Bliss. We want what we are.
It would be generated from other objects, not from what's internal, from within.
So, remember what I read before? The bliss is deposited on the objects we crave. And just comes. There is a spark. For seconds, for minutes. So, what kind of heat is that? It's not intrinsic. It depends on an object. It depends on something else, on somebody else. The heat we are looking for outside will never be permanent. It will always be an incidental property borrowed from something else. What is that something else? Our blissful inner nature. We just happen to need the right contact based on our hankering or wants, and that sparks the bliss will come from within. We just feel good, we are happy, we get what we want. But is it enough? It's never enough. We want uninterrupted bliss, uninterrupted happiness. We get restless. It goes away, and then we want something else. What's going to happen after the class, tomorrow? When will I get again something that will satisfy my heart? But it will never last long. Any type of ananda, bliss, we get from the external world is a borrowed happiness. It will be okay as long as the condition lasts. You will be okay as long as the conditions last. Whereas in a situation where you simply find yourself content with yourself, regardless the conditions or external circumstances, then our inner state will remain independent. We will simply be okay with our intrinsic natural condition. We remain self-satisfied. Capital Self. This is the goal of human birth. That's the freedom. That's moksha. That's what we want. If you didn't know, that's what you want. We want freedom from all external dependencies. The central teaching of the Gita is the attainment of this freedom. See how important it is? In order to get there, the Gita also points out that as long as we remain dissatisfied with ourselves, we will continue with this coming and going of birth and rebirth, so that eventually we will learn to accept certain facts of nature, certain facts of our life, and do something about it. What are these facts? They will come. What is the goal of life? In Sanskrit, it's called moksha. What is moksha? Using the same language, is total, complete satisfaction with myself as I am. As I am, as Atman, as well as I am with the facts of nature. You accept. You're going to cry because you don't have brown eyes or blue eyes or you are blonde. You just need to accept the fact of nature. You were born in a particular human body. Can't help it. Total acceptance, that integration, that fulfillment, that understanding of who we really are will only bring about fulfillment, will only bring about complete fulfillment. In Sanskrit it's called Purnatvam. The Bhagavad Gita aims at destroying that dissatisfaction, the dissatisfaction with ourselves. But for that, in order to get there, we need to understand. Now, the first chapter is meant for Arjuna to discover that he has a problem. And guess what? It's not just Arjuna's problem. It is our problem. Although we define samsara as the cycle of death and rebirth, its basis is the fact of something called in Sanskrit ragha, attachment, shoka, sorrow, and moha, delusion. Because there is attachment, there is sorrow. Because there is sorrow, there is confusion, delusion. We lose ourselves. We don't know who we are. We get lost in our senses. We go outside. We never go inside. That is called samsara. You keep coming back. You keep taking another human body till you finally learn the way out. Now, let's hear about it. These three, attachment, sorrow, and delusion, put together, is therefore what we call the source of samsara. The circumstances under which Arjuna discovers this problem is not very pleasant. As a warrior, based on his duty, and after attempting all sorts of remedial means to avoid war, it was determined that he and his brothers, as well as his allies, should fight this fair war against his own relatives. Now, we are not going to go into details because we spent many classes going into details, but it does happen. These things happen in the best families, but they don't go too far. He is confronted with the fact of being standing between these two armies. Take me to the middle of the battlefield and let me see, Arjuna commanded Krishna. Suddenly he sees his uncle, Bhishma, and his teacher, Drona Acharya. Acharya means teacher, who was the royal preceptor of these two bands, the Pandava brothers as well as the Kaurava. Although Arjuna knew very well that this battle was not between relatives, but between dharma and adharma, what is right and what is wrong. The moment he saw Bhishma and Drona, his intellect was overwhelmed by emotion. Emotion. That's our problem. He was overwhelmed by emotion. And for him, that was the moment when he faced the human problem, which we defined before as attachment, sorrow, and delusion. Arjuna's attachment to Bhishma and Drona was not ordinary. It was an intense attachment. For you to have an idea of the relationship, Arjuna was Drona's favorite pupil, favorite student, and he needs to fight against him. Imagine. Sorrow is directly proportional to the intensity of attachment. Sorrow is directly proportional to the intensity of our attachment. Death is not the cause of sorrow. The object is not the cause of sorrow, but it is our dependence, our leaning, psychological leaning and attachment. That is the cause of sorrow. The thought of their future death caused him sorrow. And it all happened in his mind, in his imagination. By simply seeing them and imagining the fact that he had to kill them eventually, he was overpowered by that emotion. It is very important to differentiate love and attachment. Can anybody tell me what's the difference between love and attachment? Because you may say, well, I'm attached to my children, my wife, my dog, my cat. I love therefore I'm attached. What's the difference? And love is? You see the subtle difference? Although these two emotions are very close, seem to be very close, we confuse them. Although a very similar or close form of emotion, it is rooted in different principles. In the Bhagavad Gita, attachment is criticized, whereas love is glorified. Love is presented as a characteristic of a liberated, saintly person. Attachment means selfishness. Selfishness. What do I get out of this particular relationship? I am focused on my own interest. That self-dependency is called raga, attachment. Love, on the other hand, means, as you guess, unselfishness. Attachment is always in the form of taking something, whereas love is something in the form of giving and sacrifice. Attachment is always conditional. As long as I'm comfortable with it, I'm okay. The moment I'm not, just let it go. Love is not based on conditions. It is absolutely unconditional. In attachment, the intellect is clouded. Therefore, attachment will lead to violation of the moral law or dharma. In love, the intellect is clear and will never lead to the violation of dharma or moral law. Attachment is a sign of bondage. Love is a sign of freedom. Attachment means samsara. Love is a positive virtue, and Sri Krishna later on will define a wise person as the embodiment of the universal love. Arjuna discovered he had a problem. He was overwhelmed. When there is sorrow, then there is confusion and delusion. When emotions overpower a person, then the intellect gets dull. The intellect is not able to think properly. You see? Are you following me? In intense emotions, the rational thinking is lost, and right things are seen as wrong. In intense emotions, the rational thinking is lost, and the right thing is seen as wrong, and the wrong thing as right. This is called moha, or delusion. Arjuna considered a sin to kill his own people. Arjuna intensely experiences this sorrow and delusion and decides not to fight this fair war. He just simply couldn't fight. If we analyze, we will understand that this is happening to us all the time. The problem of dependence clouds our intellect and we suffer. What's even worse, we experience delusion. We just don't know. We get restless. Why? We need to understand that our sorrow is caused by our own ignorance. The problem is in you, but the Gita also says that the solution is also in you. The discovery of the problem is not enough. It is said that you should never advise a person unless he seeks advice. You should never advise a person unless he asks for it or he seeks advice. Why?
The solution is in him.
He's not ready.
He's not asking. Why would you? That person needs to be in need, needs to crave help. If we advise without being asked, then it loses its value. What did Jesus say? Like throwing pearls to the swine. Simply words for deaf ears. The second chapter starts with Arjuna recognizing not just the problem of sorrow and delusion, but also his helplessness. He didn't know what to do. Hopeless. He was crying for help. In order to receive advice, we require humility, the right attitude towards the person from whom we receive help. Arjuna recognizes his helplessness and seeks the Lord's advice. Now, who is the Lord here? And Sri Krishna happened to be on his side. Not just that, he happened to be his auriga, charioteer. And he was his very close friend. Arjuna surrenders at the feet of Lord Krishna and asks for help. And then the teachings of the Gita starts or begin in verse number 11, chapter number 2. So go back home and start again. These are 4 topics. There are 4 topics in chapter number 2. From verse number 1 to 10, there is this understanding of Arjuna about the fact that he is helpless, and therefore surrenders to Lord Krishna. That is called in Sanskrit Sharanagati. From verses number 11 to 38, we find the yoga of knowledge Sri Krishna conveys to Arjuna. He gives Arjuna the remedy. Open your mouth. I give you the pill, the solution to your problem. From verses number 39 to 53, Sri Krishna tells Arjuna how to do it. And we talked about it. How do we do it? We need to practice. Last class, we talked about Karma Yoga.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
We will revise this again. I am feeling like Arjuna here, hopeless. Just kidding. And then from verses 54 to 72, Sri Krishna is going to tell Arjuna about this realized soul, this yogi, this mukta purusha, Stita Prajna, it's called the wise man, how he behaves, how he walks, how he sits, how he speaks. It's beautiful. The entire essence of the Gita is given in the second chapter, as well as in chapter number Brahmachari 18. What is the essence of the Gita? The essence is ignorance is the cause of all human problems. But by ignorance, we just don't mean that simple ignorance, we mean self-ignorance, the ignorance about who we are. Are we to be blamed? No one ever told us this. We are just born here and born in a family. We are introduced to a particular religion, but no one tells us exactly who we are. We need to discover this. Wake up, says the Upanishad. Uttishtata Jagrata. Arise and awake, and stop not till the goal is reached, says Swami Dhyanayogananda. So self-ignorance, the capital self is Atma Ajnanam. Jnana means knowledge, Ajnana means ignorance. Therefore, self-knowledge is the only solution for all our human problems. What are our human problems?
Suffering, attachment, sorrow. You were sad. Did you give sad?
The sad. I will never forget. Our Glenda here said, "You are sad. Sad is what? Sorrow, attachment, delusion, mnemonics." So, of course, what we want is to understand this and to find our fulfillment within us. So when Arjuna approaches Krishna, completely helpless and asking for help, Arjuna needs to change. Krishna needs to change Arjuna's mind. He needs to tell him why he needs to fight his fair war. And for that, he gave Arjuna three types of arguments, or three different levels of arguments. The first level of argument is a philosophical one. It's called this Jnana Yoga, or the Yoga of Knowledge. As I said before, and we talked about it, from verses number 12 to 38, that's where Sri Krishna conveys this philosophical approach to Arjuna. He clearly discussed the philosophy of the self, who we are, and its implications. Atma Ajnanam is the problem. The first lesson is that the body is mortal. The body, this human body, is subject to old age, disease, and death. In short, this human body, as you can see, is subject to change. Clearly. Especially for those who cross certain ages, we will never be the same. This body, of course. We have power over many things, but unfortunately we cannot conquer these three things. Number one, old age. Old age is inevitable. Number two, disease is inevitable. And number three, death is also inevitable. And once we are born here, what happens to us? You don't want to get old, you don't want to die, you don't want to get sick. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Of course we don't want that, but we need to accept and understand these facts so that there is no sorrow. It's natural. Anything that is born is bound to.
The only sure thing, right? That
In life, that this body is gonna go. Therefore, first, be ready to welcome death. But not your death, the death of this body. This mental preparation and this acceptance of physical mortality is the first lesson. The second lesson is that behind this mortal body is the real I. The mortal body is only the superficial I. Once we are mentally prepared, death will not shock us. Certainly death will disturb our mind, but after all, we are all human beings. But by the study of these principles, by the study of Vedanta and assimilation of these teachings, we may not and will not totally remove the distress, but it will definitely be more tolerable. Is it clear? This is a part of life. This is part of life, and we need to continue our journey. This is a part of life, and so we just simply need to continue our journey, not as bodies, but as the capital self. Just as one member gets off the train cannot stop, nor can my journey stop. We will all have to continue our journey. Arjuna needs to assimilate this wisdom. What is the self, the capital self? What is the Atman, the Katha Upanishad says, as fire, having entered the world, assumes forms according to the shapes of the different objects it burns, so the one Atman that exists in all beings appears in different forms according to the different objects it enters, and it exists also beyond them. The one Atman not only pervades all the beings and appears variously according to the different forms it embodies, but in its own pure nature it is quite separate from those forms and is unaffected by them. Through the upadis, the mind, the senses, and the body, that is what is meant by the upadis, it assumes various forms, but in itself it is transcendental and beyond all name and form. This Atma or Atman is Nityaha, eternal. You are eternal. I am eternal. Accepted. This Atman is Nityaha, eternal. Beyond time. This Atman is Nityaha. This Atman is Satyaha, independent. Is absolutely independent, the reality upon which everything depends, but in itself is independent. Atman is Sarvagataha, all-pervading, the one without a second. Atman is Akarta, never the doer. Atman is Abhokta, not the enjoyer. In short, that consciousness or Chaitanyam is ever immortal. Are we gonna die?
Yes and no.
Well, it all depends on your acceptance of this fact. What dies is the body, not you. Swami, no problem. According to our scriptures, you are immortal. If ever immortal, it is indestructible. Atman is indestructible. And where does it reside? In Sanskrit it's called Sarvasya Dehe, the indweller in the body of all. This permanent Atman, indestructible, is encased in perishable bodies. Perishable bodies. Therefore Krishna says, you should never grieve over the death of any living being. Never grieve, for grief is never going to change a fact that this body is going to go. Now it is important to remember, in verse number 27, Krishna says, Jatasya hi dhruvam mrityuhu, dhruvam janma mritasya cha, tasmada pariharyarte, natvam shochitum arhasi. Death is certain for the born. Rebirth is certain for the dead. You should not grieve for what is unavoidable. Now, we talked about this when we saw this verse sometime in the past. And we mentioned that we have to be careful here, because someone can just pick this verse, and justify all sorts of atrocities. After all, the body is mortal. People may think, why not killing people? Wrong. You are playing with yourself. What you do in words, thoughts, and deeds, you are doing it to yourself. What you give outside, you are giving it to yourself. Therefore, Vedanta, we need to understand that Vedanta is never against Dharma. Dharma means the moral law. It coexists with Dharma. It is Dharma. Because it's Atman. If Atman, that consciousness sitting within my heart, is sitting within you, and is of the same nature, therefore, that is the basis of all ethical and moral values. You see how simple it is? If only.
Socrates is turning on his grave right now. It's simple. It is.
I know. If only we could practice it, understand and practice. That's why Sri Krishna encourages Arjuna, please understand. And so to all of us. By quoting this, Krishna wants to come down to the next level. That is the dharmika level. Or the dharma perspective, or the level. Remember, he was trying to change Arjuna's mind. Number one, from the philosophical level. Number two, from the dharmic level. You need to fight, because dharma, what is right, is right. And it was a very fair war. So the second level of argument is from the standpoint of ethics, which we call dharma. An ethical or ethical or moral angle. From the ethical or moral angle. This goes from verses 31 to 33. Now, from the standpoint of your duty, which is called the swadharma, you should never hesitate. You should never waver. You should not think that they are your relatives. Because dharma, that is what is right, is in jeopardy.
Is what?
In jeopardy.
Jeopardy.
Krishna uses... Thank you. Jeopardy.
And waver, not waver.
Wait. You got it, right? Please tell me.
He gave me permission.
Yes, thank you. So Krishna uses the word swadharma. To understand the context, let's talk about dharma a little bit, but we don't have time. So we'll continue with this next class. So don't miss it. Now we have 5 minutes. Any questions?
That's not fair,
There will be no questions. Oh, you have a question?
Maybe you can complete. You were saying there's 4 angles he explained it from.
Yes. So we have the Jnana Yoga, or the philosophical angle, the Dharma, and ethical and moral,
and then
The philosophical.
and
What's the third one?
philosophical, ethical, and worldly. The worldly angle. The worldly is your honor as a kshatriya, as a warrior. What would people say? It's a matter of honor.
We might say the social.
The social.
It's interesting that the Gita says not to mourn, and yet Ramakrishna mourned for his nephew. Holy Mother mourned and cried many times when the disciples asked.
That's a good point. What did I say? We cannot avoid. We are human beings. We would cry. Sri Ramakrishna cried when his nephew, well, in the beginning when his nephew died, he started dancing. He was dancing out of joy because he saw the soul basically coming out from this body. But the next day, he couldn't help it. He started crying. And this is natural. We need to understand that nature affects us as it is. So, by being human is okay. Being human is okay, but we need to be aware of these facts and not let them affect us throughout our life. We need to accept it. It's going to be painful, but the only way to overcome this is through acceptance. I know it's not easy, but we can't change the fact that we are humans. That's understood. But Vedanta is a means to help us overcome this by using our intellect and understanding and acceptance. More questions?
We're supposed to be moral to everyone, does not harm anyone or anything. Isn't it a contradiction in terms to go to war?
Well, there is a war because they tried everything. They went against the moral law. How long can you bear someone to cross boundaries of your freedom? There comes a moment when you just need to set limits because it's what is right. If you just don't do it, it's detrimental to you.
The story of the snake in the village.
Yeah.
Kids were throwing stuff.
So, although nobody likes to talk about war, nobody even wants to, think about it because we all want peace. But not everyone has the same understanding about what is right and what is wrong. Why? Because of the fundamental problem. Raga, shoka, and moha. Attachment, sorrow, and delusion. Duryodhana, his cousin, was completely overpowered by delusion. So you try. That's what happens with read the newspaper.
Swami,
Yeah.
like Ramakrishna, he gave in the modern day, shape to so many disciples, and he turned their life, around. And for instance, there's so many that he influenced in a positive way that changed their totally. Was suicidal. Holy Mother. And so in modern day, Krishna, the same. I'm just saying that because we have such a literature.
Yes, well, you just brought up something very close to us monks. We are monks of this Ramakrishna order, and naturally, we certainly understand and because of our study of this literature on our teachers. We just find him an amazing soul. Isn't it? Certainly, he conveyed the teachings of the Upanishad, the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita in his own language, which is beautiful. This is a Gita class, but you're all welcome. I invite you to read Ramakrishna's teachings. He's an amazing teacher. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu